Welcome to Custom Homebuilders Solutions, a web-based software, also known as CHS, a standalone accounting suite focused on job costing and profit management for professional home builders.
Well, hello everybody. My name is Carol King and I am the developer of Custom Homebuilders Solutions, also known as CHS, which, as the name says, is the solution for professional custom home builders for handling all of their job costing and very unique accounting requirements. CHS includes so many features that home builders came together and asked me to include based on best practices and based on both my accounting degree with honors and on my heavy experience in the back offices of home builders. They told me about how so much of the software out there seemed to be more for production builders than for custom builders, and that they have their own very specific needs to handle their unique jobs. So, my goal was to pull together the accounting and all the tools for job costing that was needed so that in the back office, the accounting team was not spending so many hours making lots of spreadsheets to produce variance reports for job costs, draw request billings, insurance audit reports, figuring out cash flow and cash balances by job, where job costs and gross profit are heading on each job, and on and on and on. Now, this will be a fairly short introduction video because what I'm going to do after this is a free seminar for you that I think if you are considering purchasing CHS, or if you have already subscribed to CHS, that both you and your team should watch the seminar videos so that you really learn what CHS can do and how to use it. Think of it as going to a class that you get to do in your own time, at home, or in the office. And you know what? I can almost guarantee that you will learn a lot about handling the unique accounting needs of custom home builders, whether or not you subscribe to CHS. So if you will please continue with the videos in this playlist after this video, I'll show you step by step the steps that I went through to make CHS not as overwhelming as it could be and as simple as possible in your complex industry. So let's take a quick look at the initial main menu of CHS so that I can give you a quick overview. CHS has so many things all in one place, including the full accounting without integrating with anything like QuickBooks or anything else like that. But before we look at the main menu, let me show you something about communication that's going on here. When you first open CHS, you'll right away see the latest comments that are here. Like, for example, this is we are sending our purchase order to this Big Buck Construction. And then the project manager, George Brown, is writing something to Big Buck Construction, thanking them essentially for lowering their price on the slab. And then here's a comment back from Big Buck Construction saying that they signed the purchase order. And if you drill down on the purchase order and then how the purchase order is signed, etc., you can edit the PO, drill down on contact information, look at related comments, open another thing that's just related to the purchase order. Then you can see the bookkeeper. We've got a bill in on that Loveman job, what the Loveman job is, and that they were billing us for the higher price, and that I deducted that, etc., etc., etc. You can search for all comments for one job, or I could have just looked for Big Buck here, back and forth, where Big Buck is referenced, all sorts of things. I just wanted to show you that's going on. I won't get into too much more detail. Now I'd like to show you that I am now jumping back to the home menu with a tab across here, and that I have already opened some things that I'll be talking about just real quickly in this video, like the jobs dashboard and owner review, and the ECC, or estimated cost at completion, which that's what I'm going to focus on in just a minute because all of my builders say I need to focus on that right up front. But I also want to just show you a few other things. Let's say we're looking at vendor setup, and vendors are people that we pay bills to, anybody that we pay, and there's vendor 1099s here. But let's also collapse that and show you that there's an index to find things right here, vendor 1099s. If you can't figure out where in the menu it might be. Let's go back to home. The other thing is that the fact that this is a full accounting program with general ledgers and financials, journal entries, places to make your journal entry to close the jobs with CHS helping you, chart of accounts, means that you need to set some user permissions. Maybe there's some people working in the field that don't need to be able to open any of this accounting stuff. So you will be able to set permissions for them to say what they get access to and what they don't. Now let's make another tab happen right here, Setup and Help. First of all, when you first get CHS, you can click this to step through the setup steps with full video tutorials, step by step. But if you go to All Help Tutorials, notice how we now have another tab up here, and let's say we want to look for something like how to do 1099s. Let's put the word 1099 in, click to enter. Now we're getting all of the tutorials and videos that there are in CHS that reference 1099. So you can keep that help open. But I'd also like to show you, for example, on the estimated cost of completion screen that I'm going to come back to, there's help buttons that will take you right to what you're looking for, estimated cost of completion and various other videos that refer to and things to do on the ECC. So you can see how the help that opens is related to the window that you're on. So I'll jump back to home. Like I said, I have opened the active jobs dashboard by clicking this because it's used most often to select a job and to do all sorts of things for the job. And we're going to come back to this in just a minute. Also, there's owner review here, and it's staying open and can be refreshed as work happens. You can get a great report right here that, like I said, if you've been creating all these Excel spreadsheets, can you imagine putting together something like this? First of all, CHS is smart about dividing these things into cost plus markup, cost plus fee, and by that I meant these jobs, and showing you the original price that you entered, the original budgeted cost or estimate, your original estimated profit, the revised price calc, which CHS is really smart about and constantly revising for you based on the type of job. Then it's showing you your current costs that you're estimating as of today for when the job is completed and what your revised estimated profit is, your revised profit variance, how much money you have received for each job, so therefore remaining revenues to receive if you take it away from the revised price calc, actual job costs that have really been paid, so costs remaining to pay based on your ECC, estimated cost at completion, minus the paid costs remaining to pay. And so the net of all of that shows you how much net cash is due in or out, the revenues received basically, minus the cost remaining to pay. And then the cash balance per job, no matter how many checking accounts you use, the unpaid accounts payable, and job cash available. Now all of these things that I just mentioned could take all kinds of spreadsheets to figure out, and that's how quickly you get a report like that in CHS. What I want to show you is that you do have general ledgers and financial statements, balance sheets, and real especially a work in progress trial balance by job, which is something that the CPAs are always asking for, and you may have to scramble around if you have a generic accounting thing, but CHS is showing how much is in work in progress for one thing for each job, that you do print checks in CHS. You can look up all payables records for who you paid by vendor, by job, by cost area, that kind of thing. You can post your payroll in CHS and actually bill it to the job at a higher rate, and there's all sorts of videos about that. Your chart of accounts, your vendor's setup, tracking liability insurance, 1099s, waivers of lien, expirations for maybe state licenses, and you can upload all of these things. There is, if you see down here, uploads in file cabinet, because as you're entering bills, you can upload copies of the bills that the field can see when they open the screen to approve job costs to pay, so that you don't have to route around that big stack of bills. There's all sorts of tools in here that you will see how they are communicating and seeing the bills and seeing how much over or under they're heading and approving those bills. So the bookkeeper can be uploading copies of the bills, you can upload copies of the bids received, and you have a plan room file cabinet that gives you, if you do this, I selected some certain job and I went to open that plan room file cabinet, gives you little short URLs that you can use so that you can send the short URL, which will let them open the plans that you're sending to them. You can use this to send file or photo and choose who you're sending it to, like the electrician or whoever, and you can title your plans, etc. for that job. So hopefully that gives you sort of a quick overview. If I've opened several of these types of things, I can collapse all the menus here. But what I'd like to do is start showing you what my builders tell me that I should tell you up front about CHS. And the screen called Estimated Cost at Completion that is changing every day, probably because some costs are going over or under, or you've issued POs, that type of thing that automatically calculates because you were in one program doing your accounting. So as soon as the bookkeeper enters a bill that is a job cost, it is showing up on the ECC and affecting it. Also, as soon as you enter purchase orders, it's showing up on the ECC. But you're not integrating with anything else. It's just all happening at one time. So I keep saying the words estimated costs at completion, and you may be wondering, what exactly does that mean? Because it's kind of a mouthful. Well, I'll tell you that a retired builder that consulted for one of my builder customers called me up one day to talk to me about how a simple budget or estimate versus actual cost does not tell you that much until the job closes, and I'm going to demonstrate that in just a second. And I'm kind of like, well, all I'm making in my program is a budget to actual, because that's all the builder was asking me for when I worked for him as a controller, and that's what I knew. The builder was running around with a scribble tablet that had his original estimate on it and then writing in numbers when he knew something had changed. So what this seasoned builder told me was compare your budget to your current estimated costs at completion to know where your costs are headed in real time. And he explained to me that estimated costs at completion are today's estimate of job costs at completion based on activity as job progresses. So I've jumped out here and made a simple spreadsheet, which you will not have to make because you have CHS to demonstrate the concept of what the ECC means. So let's just say you have an original estimate on one of your lines. If you had an Excel spreadsheet that you were trying to make to do all of this, you'd have a whole bunch of lines, but let's say this is a line for who knows what, some plumbing or framing or who knows what. And you estimated originally $10,000. And then you pay half of it. So maybe you pay $5,000, and then you see that your actual versus your original estimate is under by $5,000 right now. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be under when the job is completed. That just means right now, just based on what we paid, it's under by that much. So it doesn't tell you all that much about what you're expecting at completion. Just to look at this, you can't say, oh, I'm under by 5,000. That's just really great. So it doesn't tell you much. I mean, it's a little bit of good information at the end of the job to know how much your actual went over your estimate. But as the job progresses, it's not really all that good of information. So I threw in another column to play like we're doing purchase orders, or that we know the committed costs and we have this spreadsheet, and it's not POs, but we happen to know that we actually had to agree after we did the original estimate to a higher amount for that, whatever we're budgeting for. So my higher amount is $11,000, let's say. Now what I'd like to show you is that means because it's higher than the original estimate, that would be your current estimated cost at completion, what you're currently estimating the cost to be at the end of the job. And you immediately then can compare the ECC to your original estimate and say, I'm going over by $1,000, which this part right here doesn't tell you anything about. Suddenly you know you're going over by 1,000, and you know that you still have 6,000 outstanding to pay, not 5,000. This spreadsheet does not take into account all sorts of other things that can affect your current estimated cost at completion. What if you estimate some costs for change orders? What if your actual costs come in at $9,000 and that's all you're going to pay, so you need to mark those as done so that your current ECC changes to that? And there's some other things that can affect what your current ECC is. So you end up having to devise a lot of formulas to say if this is higher than that and that's higher than this and this is under this, or the actual costs are done, then I want to change my ECC. So what if you don't have a program like CHS, but yet you're wanting to look at that current ECC like every day, and you have to comb through your accounting records or job cost records to change what you've paid so far right here, and then you have to comb through or find out from somebody if we've committed to a different amount. Let's say this is under our original estimate. And look how this shows that ECC versus the original estimate is under by 1,000, not this 5,000 thing over here, and that 4,000 is outstanding. I did write that much of a formula in here to take the higher or lower if there's a PO. but that's not a complete worksheet. You would have to do some complicated formulas and some other columns in here, like for the change orders, etc., to actually know what your current ECC is. So that's the scribble sheet that the builder that I used to work for carried around, scribbling in stuff like this and marking out what was the original. And so this is how I grasped, though, what an ECC is. So we're going to jump into CHS and see what there is there that is just grabbing the actual cost, grabbing any purchase orders that you issued, and grabbing any change order estimated costs, etc., etc. So let's get on with it. So I've jumped back into CHS, and like I showed you before, in a tab I had the jobs dashboard open, and I selected the job that we've been talking about, and I've opened the estimated cost at completion worksheet that instantly brings in and calculates everything for you. So I can go to the tab here. By the way, this is where you would go to work on the original budget or estimate, but I open the estimated cost at completion. Now I'd like you to think about that spreadsheet that you would do and all the formulas that you would put in, and think about how as soon as you open this in CHS, because you were attached to accounting, all of the actual costs, job costs that have been entered in your accounting are showing here, whether they are paid or unpaid. For example, this one isn't paid yet, so you can see that it has an outstanding amount over here. This one has been paid, so there's not an outstanding. So you can see a paid and outstanding for those actual costs, and CHS just did that for you. You can drill down on the actual costs and see the detail behind them, and if you say, oh, this is in the wrong cost code, you can maybe edit that little actual cost to get it moved to the right cost code because something happened. Now if you use purchase orders, there probably won't be many errors in cost codes, because if you issue some purchase orders out there and a person gets a bill from, say, whoever this is, ProBuild, and they can click, and when they're entering the bill and see a purchase order, they can select that and it'll drop in to help them enter the bill and get all the right cost codes in, because the purchase orders have cost codes. So you can see the original budget and estimate, plus you can also see that there's some change order costs going on here. And I'd like to tell you that those change order costs, if I drill down on them, are costs that you estimate when you create the change order and then you set a price. Since the estimated cost of completion is your costs, it's not showing the price to the customer, it's showing the estimated cost. So you can watch the costs. But I'm going to just go down here to rough electrical and final electrical, because this is more similar to where we started our spreadsheet with. We budgeted this much amount, and if we drill down on it, we can see that we actually did it based on living square feet, and we said 60% of it at $1.95 is for rough, and then we did 40, if I drill down on it, 40% for the final. If I do a sum right here of what these two are under the group electrical, I can see the sum was 9,000 something for both of those. But let's say for some reason it's just 10,000 to keep it easy, that we suddenly had to agree to pay to the electrical person. So let's say we want to show that that's what's committed. Well, first of all, you don't have to use POs in CHS, but I'm going to show you why it is so valuable. There is a builder revise column here, which would be like that scribble sheet I mentioned. If the builder knows that this is going to be 60% of 10,000, so it's going to be 6,000. They can write a note here, we are going to have to pay higher, etc., 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 and submit it and close. That's like the scribble sheet. In case, for some reason, you just do not want to use POs, and I'm telling you, you don't have to send the PO to the person, but it's going to give some information to the back office about who's doing the work. So we'll show that in just a second. But notice how the ECC, as soon as the builder put in a revision, changed to 6,000 and immediately told you that you're headed over budget on this by 577. So there's that, if you just want a place to scribble it in. But let's change that back to 0. Because I would real quickly like to show the power of POs. So right here you can look through and you can say, what have I not issued POs for? Because you see a 0 amount here. You can scroll and you can see up here, we have various POs issued, but right here we haven't issued our PO. So you can right here click plus PO, And it's going to tell you that since it didn't find any POs, it's going to at first insert the budget amount. But you're about to change that to $6,000. And you're going to tell the back office and everybody else who's going to do the work, which is Varnell Electrical, let's create the purchase order. We now have a PO for $6,000 to Varnell Electrical, and we can put some notes on the PO as per your attached bid, maybe, whatever it is that you got in after you did your budget. So let's close that and see how CHS automatically knows about that PO. And there's that $577 over because the ECC on this has suddenly become $6,000. I'll pause the video a minute and go make the PO for the other one just so we have it. So I made the purchase order for $4,000, which together is the $10,000, and together is the amount that's going over right here. So suddenly your over budget down here has gone up. I don't know if you noticed when we first opened it that it was showing $4,000 something down here. But you can see how using POs is so valuable, because I'd like to jump back to the jobs dashboard and show you vendors to use, something that you can hand off to the field based on purchase orders issued. And you can see all purchase orders issued, just their names and what cost code they're in. And if we get down to that electrical, you can see it says Varnell Electrical, has the contact name, email numbers, etc. So this is something you can hand off to everybody to say who is doing the work as you get your POs issued, whoever's doing that. So let's talk about a couple more little things here. I'd like to show you something up here under slab contract. And just at a glance, you can see that you issued a variance PO, and notice that CHS has just brought all of this in. By the way, when you do an original budget plus estimate the cost of change orders, we add those together to be what your total budget is. That original budget doesn't get changed. And we did issue a PO for all of this stuff, and we wrote checks for this amount, and so we're over by $2,000. But if you're real quickly wanting to see why is that, what was that $2,000 for, you can see the list of POs and some notes that were written. Big Buck has to charge more for soil conditions. So you know right away what is going on. And there can be all sorts of things that you see about what's going on, like materials for framing. Why is that over? And you can take a look. First of all, we took a discount because they offer a discount. And we forgot to originally budget for the sales tax. If you study on it, you can figure out that the difference between these two is $1,400 something. You can also drill down on all comments back and forth about this particular cost code, either to the vendor, between the project manager and the bookkeeper, and see all of that, but I won't take up your time with that. The other thing is this next line down, we budgeted $2,500 for concrete pumping, but we see that $2,300 was paid, and perhaps for whatever reason we know that that is all we're going to pay. So we don't want it to be the budgeted amount that is our ECC anymore. We want to check mark this actual cost as done, and we see that it's now $2,300 because we've marked that the cost is done and it's minus $200. Really, at the end of the job, when you're all done getting ready for the contract balance due and wanting to know what the ECC is, it should pretty well be matching what your actual costs are. So there are some tools behind here where you can say mark all the actual costs as done, or mark all the actual costs that are 95% done or above as done, which is something that seasoned contractor told me they did do near the end on all their worksheets that they were doing, is marking all the actual costs as done, so those turn into the ECC, and at the very end your ECC is probably matching your actual costs. Now this is critically important that you have something like this if you're wanting to get a report like I showed you on the owner review screen that you can get based on the ECC and where it's headed and how much actual costs and what your current profit today is expecting to be, that kind of thing. And also if it's cost plus type of job, you need to be showing that home buyer where their costs are heading. And so you need some worksheet like this that you can quickly print and that they can see. Speaking of quickly printing, let me just do one more thing. I'm going to Report Central here. These are all the reports, mostly a ton of reports available just for this job, but I'd like you to see ECC and cost variances. There's very simple ones that aren't showing you all the stuff that's on this one, that just lists all those ECC kind of like you see on the worksheet, or a summary by group, or summaries by stages, but we won't even go as far as what stages are right now. But this is kind of a Bible kind of report. It's called the Variance Cost Approval Report because right here you can see the ECC information that we saw on the worksheet on the first line, and you can see those actual costs, $450, and you can see a detail of those actual costs and what's paid, what's marked as to pay in a check run. If it says just unpaid, you can see that in red here. Various kinds of things like that, but you can see the detail of what the costs are, and so that's really kind of a really cool report that you can print and without having to drill down on all the actual costs. The other thing is that based on how you are connected to an accounting program, you can get an outstanding to pay by cost code here, and I showed you how it was calculating that over there. You can see based on the percent complete today that it was showing on there, it'll show you outstanding unpaid for completed things, and I won't get into it, I'll just show you that's there, and outstanding unpaid to complete. And that is based on knowing what your estimated costs of completion are. If you don't know what those are and you just have actual, you're not ever going to get good numbers like this. And that ECC is used, like I said, to come up with a contract balance due today, showing where it's headed to give to your buyers, etc. It becomes extremely important. I've actually had some builders using CHS for a while that for some reason never came here and then suddenly discovered it, the ECC, and started realizing how super valuable this is to them every single day, and how CHS is doing all of the work to accomplish this type of thing for you. So please continue on to our seminars to learn more about this and other things in CHS to help you make a determination whether to subscribe, or if you've subscribed, to help teach you as if you went to school to learn about CHS. And thank you so much for watching.